Okay, today we speak with Christophe Guibert, professor in sociology at University in Angers, to have more information about coastal tourism. So please, can you introduce yourself, what you do as a teacher, and your main research topics?
Hello, my name is Christophe. Yes, I'm professor of sociology at the University of Angers. I work in the Faculty of Tourism, Culture and Hospitality. On the pedagogical level, I coordinate the S2 training course in bachelor's degree in tourism and nautism, heritage and coastal culture, and master's degree in tourism, ocean space and coastal society. In terms of research, I have been working for about 20 years on nautical activities from a sociological point of view, questions around localized political action when local community take over nautical activities to enhance their territory according to what interests, for example, around surfing. On the coast, I also question the questions about the employment of the instructors of nautical activities, but also more globally and more recently, the employment in the coastal tourism sector in a general way, and notably the question of tourism seasonality.
Okay, can you explain what coastal tourism is in a few words, and since when have coastal areas really developed? Why having coastal areas is beneficial for a country?
For the French case, where I'm from, it's the middle of the 19th century that there is a change regarding the coastline and the way in which the coasts are perceived. Historically, the coastline was frequented by the aristocracy, by the large bourgeois families who thought of the coastline as a space for leisure, for the development of social capital. This is where the first seaside resorts developed, which are now perceived as posh destinations. For example, Biarritz, Arcachon, de Villeux, Dinard. But progressively, socially and by legal frameworks that free up working time and allow more vacations, there will be a progressive massifications of access to the coast, perceived as a place for vacation and leisure. Thinking of the beach as a leisure space is a historical social construction that makes French society progressively see the beach as a leisure space. This doesn't mean that everyone goes to the beach and that everyone likes going to the beach. The development of coastal tourist destinations has been done in a very structuring manner, either on the initiative of local communities or entrepreneurs, particularly in the real estate sector, construction of hotels, campgrounds, housing developments, and other, or on the initiative of public authorities, particularly the state, with national and regional plans that have helped to facilitate coastal development. There is a whole legal framework that makes it impossible to do just anything in France on the coast. There is the coast law. There are very dense and varied protection zones to protect the coastline. We observe a contemporary frequentation of the coastline, quite dense, nevertheless regulated in particular by an economic dimension. The coast in certain seaside resorts explains the setting aside of certain social categories. I mentioned the legal framework, which means that one cannot access all the places, certain places are protected, one cannot build on a certain portions of the coastline.
Okay, nice. Coastal areas are often praised, coveted by tourists. What are the reasons, in your opinion?
So there is a relationship that is perceived as a positive with regard to the coastline, the sea, the ocean, the landscapes, the sun, the beach. There is whole imaginary perceived in a positive way. Spontaneously, When we say to ourselves, where will we go on a vacation this summer, the beach is among the most popular destinations statistically. Even if we hear since the COVID recently more and more tourists wanting to turn to a green tourism, wanting to get out of mass tourism, go off the beaten track, return to nature in the countryside. This is developing a lot, but quantitatively it remains minimal compared to the very dense frequentations that we observe on the coasts. Because the consequences are the feelings perceived by part of the local population of over-tourism or hyper-tourist frequency, their effects on land, house prices, accessibility, ecological impact. The high number of visitors leads to more pollution, more waste management. So it's certainly a popular destination, but there are nevertheless perverse effects.
Yes, so the use of the sea for such diverse purposes must cause certain pressures, like the degradation of space, climate change. Do these phenomena lead to a loss of attractiveness for these spaces?
I don't think so. I think that people have a short memory. For example, at the moment, the bachelor's degree students in Les Abaudon are working on questions about the memory of the Xynthia storm that took place 12 years ago. A minority of the students were informed of the existence of this storm. They have forgotten, they don't know. We are not interested in these questions, which are very technical, for example, on erosion, the risk of marine submersion. We know that it exists. We look at images on TV, but concretely, few people are conscious of these risks or who are conscious of it but who pass over. My house is 20 years risks. In 20 years risks to be in water, but I buy anyway. It's quite astonishing.
Yeah, we took advantage of the spaces to develop nautical activities. There is a diversification of activities, and the coasts are now a place of leisure. I know that you have done research on surfing. Can you tell me more about it?
Yeah, sure. Surfing appeared in Biarritz in the middle of the 1950s, thanks to an American film director. He saw waves during a stay in the city and wanted to bring a surfboard back to Biarritz on his future visits. There is a first contract with the young male bourgeois living in Biarritz or rich Parisian vacationers. They are the ones who see an interest in surfing, whereas the neighboring towns do not have this positive perception of surfing as a leisure activity. It's an initially bourgeois activity which developed in the years of the 1970s and 1980s with the competitions, the massification of the practicing, the creation of French Federation, and gradually in the years of the 1980s and 1990s, the professional competitions make this activity visible in particular in Aquitaine, and it becomes a tool of territorial marketing. Some municipalities are taking advantage of surfing to enhance their territory and thus attract tourists. Surfing is now perceived as a legitimate activity with very important economic impacts. The surfing actors speak of the COVID effect. There is multiplications of the practicing, and now on all the French beaches, as soon as there is little wave, there are surfers.
Okay, so in this case, are there any regulations to control the development of tourism in this water sport?
To be a surfing instructor, you absolutely have to be a state graduate. The regulation is done at the level of the number of graduates each year. Afterwards, there is the sharing of beach and coastline use zones, notably by local authorities and town halls, who have the power of police, and it's they who can say which is the bathing zone on a beach, the surfing zone, the kite surfing, etc. So the regulations are made by the local authorities who can select places. But the town halls also decide how many surf schools they can set up. And other municipalities also regulate the number of instructors per school to avoid too much activity on the beaches, which can happen sometimes, especially on the beaches of the Landes.
What do you think would attract young people to work in this field? Do you know the current job opportunities and the salaries in Europe?
Employment on the coast is represented by all types of accommodation, hotels, open air hotels, gigs. On the French, Spanish, Italian and Greek coasts, there is very high density of offers, so finding a job in these professions is easy. Nevertheless, there are constraints linked to the profession which have resulted, especially this summer, in a shortage of manpower. Many hotels and restaurants were unable to open because they couldn't find sufficient skilled workers. There are many jobs around the supervision of nautical activities, animation. There are also many jobs in the surfing and sailing schools that are not related to supervision, for example, reception, communication, clean of equipment. There are also jobs around the surveillance of the beaches, where there is also a lot of hiring. Here too, a specific diploma is required. The concern, especially in France, mainly on the Atlantic coast, is the question of tourist seasonality. The peak season is July and August, and in winter the number of visitors is relatively low. So there are no more jobs. There is less need in terms of manpower because there are no tourists and therefore there is less job offer. So these jobs are very strongly linked to tourist seasonality and therefore to more or less short work contracts. So when you are young, you can spend a summer season on the beach and a winter season in the mountains, or you can work abroad. But when you get older and you want to stabilize yourself, to start a family, it becomes more complicated because you can't work typical hours. Stabilizing your family is not always compatible with certain jobs in tourism, especially seasonal jobs. Salaries are very variable because in the hotel restaurant industry, the tip system can sometimes increase the salary level. Otherwise, there are collective agreements that make certain salary levels correspond to certain types of jobs. But last year, precisely because of the shortage, job seekers are in a strong position and can negotiate a salary with the employer, who is sometimes obliged to accept if he wants to maintain his activity. There are also some rare jobs such as surfing and sailing instructors, lifeguards, and those who give lessons in the swimming pools of campsites, for example. It is necessary to have a certain level of qualification, and there the levels of remuneration can be much higher, from 2,000 euro to sometimes 4,000 euro per month during the high season.
Okay, what are the educational opportunities for young people who want to enter this field? Is there a minimum number of studies required?
Most jobs, statistically speaking, do not require a high level of education. There is no need to study to be a good bartender or waiter in a restaurant. To be a receptionist in a hotel, you need some technical skills on software offers. For example, you may need a BTS in tourism, but finally, the majority of jobs do not require a high level of education. It's not necessary to have a bachelor's or master's degree. Nevertheless, there are professions that require a higher level of skills at the master's level, and here we are more concerned with the strategic definition of tourism definition at the level of local authorities, tourist offices, labeling in tourist establishments, managerial strategies in establishments. So we also need employees with a higher level of education, of course, but if we look at the whole job offer, most of them are the baccalaureate level.
Okay. And what do you think are the best places to work in this field?
I think it depends on the subjectivity of the employees. There are people who want to work close to where they live. Others want to work in the place where they were on vacation during their childhood or adolescence. Others want to work to gain experience, to be confronted with different cultures, and to progress linguistically. Some like to be in high-density tourist destinations where there are many people and a lot of activity, and others prefer quieter destinations. These choices are very personal, but perhaps there is an attachment to one's home territory. There is an effect of belonging to a territory in which one finds oneself better.
To finish, what would you suggest to young people who are currently looking for a job or an internship in Europe? What advice would you give them?
As far as seasonality is concerned, the time of high frequentations is finally relatively short. This means that during this period, you have to be very active and adaptable. You have to commit yourself professionally in a very dense way in July and August. You don't count your hours too much during these periods. At the end of the summer, there is often wear and tear, fatigue that is physically visible, but on the other hand, they don't work throughout the winter because they have managed to annualize a sufficient level of remuneration that allows them to live quite comfortably. This is both a difficulty and an advantage, and everyone can find their way around it. We find the same characteristics for the winter season in the mountains.
Okay, thank you for this interview.
Thank you.